Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I would like to welcome you to episode 86 of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today I want to visit with you about some of the uses of human resources or HR in your FCPA compliance program. I hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you very much for listening. Hello everyone, this is Tom Fox and I would like to welcome you to this episode of the FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report. Today I wanted to visit with you about the use of HR in your compliance program. I previously talked about human resources as a very good friend to compliance, but today I want to talk about some of the specific things that I think HR has an expertise in that they can bring to any FCPA compliance program. And this is in the area of hiring, incentives, and discipline. I think most people recognize that if you have a violation of the FCPA, then discipline is certainly called for. But one of the things that HR brings to this conversation is consistency in discipline. Quite simply, if you're going to discipline someone in Latin America, Africa, Central Asia for a type of conduct, you have to discipline in the United States for the same or similar conduct. If you don't have some similar disciplinary programs or protocols, I think this can lead to a really damaging message about your the way you think about FCPA violations. In other words, people in the U.S. are going to be treated differently than people in the outside of the U.S. And that's one of the things that HR continually, I think, practices and preaches, which is the fair process doctrine. The fair process doctrine is something that I talk and write about quite a bit. But the fair process doctrine generally holds that if someone believes that the process through which they have gone is fair, they are likely to accept the results. As most people know, I'm a recovering trial lawyer, and I really observe this in the mediation process, where a mediator, jointly appointed or agreed to by the parties, will help to resolve a case. Many personal injury plaintiffs who are not really familiar with the litigation system believe that the mediator is a type of judicial adjunct, where lawyers know that's not true. He's a private citizen. Nevertheless, the aggrieved third party, if they have the opportunity to tell their story to someone who they believe is independent, are much more likely to resolve the case, because one of the things they want to do is tell about how they've been wronged. And that really translates over to the compliance world, particularly in the area of whistleblowers. One of the things that is incumbent with your internal whistleblower policies to give it credibility, I think, is to provide feedback and let a whistleblower know where you are in the process to the extent you can do so. It's important that you regularly communicate with the whistleblower. Hopefully they will be known to you or not anonymous, because that lends a certain air of credibility. But that's something that HR deals with in a area of, or a wide variety of areas, obviously wider than simply compliance, discrimination, harassment, etc. So I think HR can be useful guidance to you in the compliance arena regarding the fair process doctrine and the consistent application of discipline going forward. Another area that HR has a lot of experience in, that certainly more than compliance does, is in the area of hiring. Many companies do not really talk about or think through hiring as part of their compliance program, but I want to suggest to you that that's something that could be a key component to your best practices compliance program. Obviously, you want to screen out, to the extent you can, liars, thieves, and cheaters. It's important that those people not be hired by your company. But I think HR has another unique role to play in compliance regarding hiring, and that's to start the conversation. If a part of your conversation in the interview process and in the hiring process is a conversation about doing business ethically, doing business the right way, doing business in compliance with the law, not pushing the envelope, those sorts of messages resonate, and it will allow you to communicate to a prospective employee that what will be expected, or the expectations of them going forward. And if you can set those expectations prior to the hiring process, you have a much better opportunity to communicate continued pieces of that information throughout an employee's tenure with your company. HR can do that. HR is well suited to do so. And really, it can be anywhere in the hiring process. It can be your initial intake interview. It can be in the forms that they're going to fill out. It can be on second and third interviews if you go through that type of process in your company. But really, anywhere in the hiring process, you can start the conversation on compliance. And HR can be a huge part of that going forward. In addition to setting expectations and starting a conversation, I think that if you talk about things like the fair process doctrine, talk about things like doing business the right way, it can set you up as a market differentiator that will make people want to work for your company. I read over and over again about smaller startups where they have those types of conversations with employees, and that really sets you off as a market differentiator. I am, I guess, part of the me generation, if I could think of the generation I belong to, tail end of the baby boom. And the things that motivated me in my generation, I think, have changed for Gen X and the millennials. And one of the things that I consistently see in the literature is that they want to work for companies that are ethical. So if you can start that conversation, you will have what Rebecca Rosen terms as really a market differentiator for you. So it's something that HR can help you with. And then the final thing is, to the extent you can, you want to weed out as many bad apples before they become bad apples. Now, whether you can do that through a simple rote background check, such as financial records or criminal records, I think criminal records are a pretty good sign. I don't put any stock in financial records because anyone could have had certainly a bad time during the financial crisis of 07-08. If you have a health issue, that can wipe you out. You can have your credit score destroyed. You can have your credit score lessened by people looking into your credit score. So taking a look at credit scores as any basis for those types of decision, I put zero stock in. But nevertheless, there are, the criminal background checks are things that you can and should do, and HR can and should lead those efforts going forward. Another area that I don't think gets enough attention are reference interviews. And it probably is a twofold reason. One is most people think a reference is basically useless. And they think it's basically useless because the person who is giving the reference has certainly been told by, or should have been told by, the person listing their name that they could be asked to give a reference. And that the second thing is, many companies, when asked for a formal reference, will only confirm dates of employment and perhaps wage and salary information. But I'm talking about a different type of reference interview, and that's one where you really dig a little bit deeper into a prospective candidate's work history with a company. I came out of the energy industry, and although it's probably millions of people work in the energy industry, it's still a fairly cohesive and coherent group of people in the industry. And my experience has been that certainly in cities like Houston, where I work and practice, that in large part you can find someone who has known someone at another large energy concern, whether it be one of the oil and gas companies, energy companies, Shell, Exxon, Chevron, etc., whether the service companies, Halliburton, Schlumberger, Weatherford, Baker Hughes, whether it can be any of the myriad other service companies that work for the big boys or the other service companies. But there's always someone or someone who knows someone in one of those companies that generally knows about a prospective candidate for hire. And if you can find someone who has a personal relationship with someone at another company who knows a prospective candidate, and you call them and ask for a frank assessment. That is something that I have found, much to my surprise when I started doing it, that people are willing to share that. You will not get people libeled or slandered, but there's enough information given, even if it's between the lines, that you can utilize in your evaluation. You can simply really, it's really as simple as, how does this person do business? Do they do business ethically? Those sorts of things. So the reference interview, I don't think gets enough play, but it's something that you could use going forward as part of your compliance program. One of the other areas that HR is very good at is employee evaluation and setting compensation. Now, there are many ways to set compensation, and I would advocate to you that there should be some component of compensation that's based on business ethics, compliance, doing business in compliance with the law, however you may choose to phrase that within your company. There are innumerable compensation experts, both third parties that are available to you, and you probably have some in-house. But the compensation, excuse me, the basis of compensation from a compliance component can be a part of a discretionary bonus paid at the end of the year. It can be an evaluation of whether that person has engaged in any known violations. It can be a set of metrics if they're senior management, where you've asked them to communicate tone at the top. It can be their certification of completion of training and not being aware of any FCPA violation going forward. Here you're really limited to your imagination, but if you have as a portion of your discretionary bonus a compliance evaluation, a 10%, a 20% component, I think this goes a long way towards communicating, putting your money where your mouth is for your company, that you will be compensated in part on whether you do business in compliance with laws and with doing business ethically within your company. The second area is employee evaluations. As is with employee compensation, this is something that HR is generally pretty sophisticated about and pretty helpful with, and certainly more so than a compliance practitioner or a chief compliance officer, or indeed someone in the legal department. So HR can help you have a portion of an employee's evaluation be about compliance. It can be a review of their steps they've taken at the company. It could be the metrics that I discussed. It can be training, successful completion of training. It can be a myriad of things. And this could be important in your evaluation of employees to promote. But I would suggest to you it's most critically important when it gets to senior level employees, particularly when you're promoting up from the ranks up into senior management or starting with management, and that you deliver, once again, many of the same messages that you have delivered when you hired someone. If you start talking about doing business in compliance, doing business that way, doing the business in conjunction with our code of conduct, doing business consistent with our code of business ethics, all of those things are important, and you can continue having that conversation with someone who is in line to receive a promotion to management or senior management. You certainly want to have a person who's going to do business in compliance, and in compliance with your code of conduct, and in compliance with the FCPA in your senior management. But you can continue that education process, you can continue that conversation, you can continue that set of expectations that you would have of an employee. And hopefully that employee will then take that to heart and use the same to communicate down with his team and his direct reports if he or she is evaluated to senior management. So the area of employee evaluation, employee succession planning, I don't think that's an area that probably is considered enough from the compliance perspective as well. In fact, that's an area many companies don't do very well. Clearly, you should have a succession plan for your department in place. But does that succession plan take into account a compliance perspective? You can only take into account a compliance perspective if you have had compliance evaluations or compliance components to evaluations going forward. So that's something that can be a part of a much more well-rounded taking a look at employees who may be eligible to be promoted up to senior management. It is important that employees understand their obligations going forward, and that they be measured on, to the extent that they can be, on those obligations as they move up the chain and up the ladder. And HR can help you with these areas in a way that I don't think many chief compliance officers think through. So these are some of the things that HR can do for you in your compliance program going forward. If you have any questions on this FCPA Compliance and Ethics Report specifically, or more generally about the FCPA, you can contact me at Tom Fox at tfox at tfoxlaw.com. I look forward to visiting with you again, and I hope you have enjoyed this report. Thank you.